I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: why is The Innocent Man one of the best things that has ever been brought to Netflix? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because I've just finished watching the brand new true crime documentary series, The Innocent Man. By the way, there are going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the show and you want to watch it without any spoilers at all, go away, watch it, and then come back and watch this video after that. If you're still here, you have been warned. The Innocent Man is a series that is brought to us by John Grisham. It is based on the book of the same name that he wrote. It is not a fictional, made-up story. It is a true crime documentary account. And it's about two different murders of two different females that took place in the 1980s in the town of Ada in Oklahoma. The first crime happens in December 1982 when a young lady by the name of Debbie Carter is brutally raped and murdered, and two men, Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz, are subsequently charged with her crime and then they are found guilty. But here's the thing, they're not guilty. They spend time in jail, on death row in fact, after being found guilty of these crimes. One of the men, Ron Williamson, came within just 5 days of being executed. Before, in 1999, they are exonerated of this crime. They are found to have not been involved based on DNA evidence, which actually shows they weren't involved. Not only that, but then after that, in around 2006, a guy by the name of Glenn Gore, the real murderer, is actually convicted of this brutal rape and murder and then is subsequently found guilty of the crime. The second crime happens in 1984, again in Ada, when a young store clerk named Denise Haraway is kidnapped from the store where she is working that night. She is then subsequently killed, and two men, Tommy Ward and Carl Fontenot, are found guilty based on the back of a false, coerced confession. Now, what makes this particular crime so fascinating is the fact that they didn't actually have the murder victim's body at the time these men are charged and then subsequently found guilty of that crime. Her body does not turn up until 1985, but when they discover her body, what it reveals is that all of the key claims that they made in their confession were absolutely false. So first of all, they claim that she was wearing a particular top, and they're very specific about this item of clothing that she's wearing. She's found she's not wearing that item of clothing at all. They claim that she was, her body was disposed of in a particular location. Her body is not found in that location. Instead, her body is found in a completely different location, some 20 odd miles away. They claim that they burnt the body. That couldn't have happened because they claim they burnt down the shack with the body in it. The local farmer who owned the property said, no, I burnt that shack down sometime before that. They claim that she was killed by stabbing. They said that they stabbed her and that the knife wounds that they inflicted upon her was what actually killed her. Well, the body is found and the pathologist says there is no indication of any stab wounds at all. Not only that, but the pathologist says she wasn't stabbed, she was shot in the head. That's how she was killed. They didn't make any mention of any gun, let alone shooting her and killing her that way. And most importantly of all, I guess, is this big, whopping great red flag that should have been raised right from the very beginning. They claimed that there was a third man involved in the crime, a guy by the name of Odell Titsworth. They claimed that he was there with them, that he perpetrated this brutal killing. He was part of the crime from woe to go. In actual fact, though, when the police go to investigate this, they discover that Odell Titsworth actually had a broken arm. He couldn't have actually been involved in this crime because they had broken his arm a couple of days beforehand, and he wouldn't have been able to actually participate in this crime. Now, to get around that, the prosecutor claimed at the trial that these men were transferring their guilt onto Odell, that they had just lied about him being there, and they were trying to transfer their guilt onto him. They even had a retrial in 1988, well after the body is found, and lo and behold, they're found guilty again. Now, if you think all of that sounds absurd, it gets even worse, because these two men are still in prison for this crime. Despite all of that, they have not been released. This series is just astounding. Part of it is the subject matter. And obviously that's a big part of it. There's just something so compelling about the story, but also the way the story is told. This is just such a beautiful example of visual storytelling, of documentary filmmaking. It's so reminiscent to me of the great Errol Morris and the style in which he tells his documentary stories. There are some truly glorious visuals in this. The use of visuals and the musical score is phenomenal as well. And it all lends itself to telling this profoundly important story and really drawing you deeply into the heart of this injustice and how these events all unfolded. There's so much of that in this documentary. It is a profoundly important example, I think, of putting artistry at the service of unpacking the facts and drawing people deeper into these true life events. The Innocent Man, I think, does something that other true crime documentary series on Netflix just don't get right. So things like Making a Murderer or The Keepers or The Staircase. What you have first of all is there's absolutely no doubt here. You have a set of facts that are put together, and this narrative and the story of the documentary is so well constructed. There's just no real room for doubt here. There are little moments of speculation, but they're around the fringes. The substance of the facts and what's gone on here, they're there. It's verifiable stuff. It's really clear. There's no conspiratorial stuff. Like, this is one of the problems with The Keepers, and this is something that this show doesn't fall into the trap of. Often this type of true crime documentary series can fall prey to just sort of throwing in all sorts of speculative stuff and then trying to build a narrative around lots and lots of speculation and circumstantial evidence. This show does not do that. It actually demonstrates for you in a very clear and concise and robust way why these men are innocent, and on top of that, who else could have actually perpetrated these crimes. It doesn't do things in a cliched way. This is something that I think that I found really difficult about Season 2 of Making a Murderer. Season 2, it seemed a lot of the stuff with the family just felt like filler this time around. It just felt like something that they were doing to work to formula. In this series, that's not what you get. You get the interviews and the real life stories. It's profound stuff. It's really sincere. It's important. Everything that you see on screen is put at the service of drawing you deeper into the story and leading you to this really important conclusion. And the way in which particularly the families of the victims are part of this documentary as well, and them telling their stories, it's really quite profound. It's like the whole picture. Lastly, it's really fascinating to me about how the series and the true events that it portrays really does challenge that myth that a lot of people talk about of white privilege. You hear this term white privilege thrown around a lot, particularly in relation to crime. But here you have these two different murder cases, and you have 4 men who are found guilty wrongly of these crimes. All 4 of them are white. Interestingly, there's one guy who was involved who didn't end up in jail, who didn't end up even going before the courts, and that's Odell Titsworth, who's a Native American. So to me, what it highlights really strongly is that it's really not about race here. It's about other factors. Do you have the wealth to be able to defend yourself well and to fight your case, to plead your case if you find yourself in a situation like these men did? Because that really matters here. Are you someone who is well connected enough? Or do you have the right sort of social capital? Or are you viewed as a bit of a pariah in the community? All of these things very clearly are shown in these particular cases to be the driving factors for why these men ended up in the situation and then obviously being found guilty and put in prison or on death row as they did. And I think it's a really, really important examination of the justice system in America. And it really does begin to, it doesn't delve too strongly into them, but it very clearly puts some questions on the table. And one of the big questions that it seems to me that is very much part of this documentary crime series is the American justice system fundamentally broken at the moment? Are there some serious problems here? And if there are not, how come these sorts of things are able to go on? I can't recommend this series enough. As I said, this I think is just one of the best things that's been brought to Netflix. I think it is absolutely by a long shot the best true crime documentary series that they've ever put on Netflix. It's one of the best I've ever seen, and I've watched a lot of them. It is absolutely worth your time. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please consider financially supporting the channel. The links for how you can do that are found in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you next week on The Daily Question.